They all are different pieces of history, and they drive completely differently. They're time machines. I try to drive them all at least once every 2 or 3 weeks. You know, if you ask me what would be the car I would get in and drive right now from here to Los Angeles, that would be Ferrari P45 by Pininfarina. It's the most usable, it's an incredible supercar. It's the only car that, you know, my wife will happily ride in and even fall asleep while we're cruising through the night. But, you know, there is something about getting in the oldest Ferrari that still exists, 002, which is our 159S that won the Turin Grand Prix, driven by Raymond Summers. And quite frankly, if Ferrari had not won that race, I'm not sure the company would even be around today, because it was Ferrari's winning that major race that got people to call up and say, I want to buy a car like the Turin Grand Prix winner. You're driving a car that was built in 1947. The war had just ended. It was bombed into obliteration, out of the ashes, phoenix-like. Ferrari started his company. He got Colombo, who was a fantastic engineer, to make a jewel of a 2-liter, 12-cylinder motor. He got the best racing drivers in the world, and he went out and he won races. So it's the history and the stories and the texture when you drive them that really intrigue me. I've always loved cars from a very young age, and I was lucky when I was about 12 years old. I could ride my bicycle from my home in New Rochelle all the way to Greenwich, Connecticut to Mr. Canetti's Ferrari dealership, and I used to stand outside and look in. And generally, people said Mr. Canetti really didn't like kids, but eventually he noticed me out there and he said, all right, kid, you can come inside. And in those days, sports cars were simple, light, and nimble, and an owner could basically buy a car that you could drive on the road legally, drive to the track, race on Sunday, and drive home on Monday. And even the prototypes really were kind of road legal. They had to have 2 seats, headlights, taillights, turn signals, windshield wipers, even luggage boxes. I mean, you could buy an MGB, a Triumph, an XKE, a Cobra, a Corvette. You could take it racing. I mean, if you were lucky enough to have enough money, you could buy a Porsche or a Ferrari, but it still wasn't something that you needed mega millions of dollars to do to go racing. My first car was a 1954 Studebaker, which was designed by Raymond Loewy, the guy who designed the Coke bottle. And I was about 15 at the time, and there was a company called J.C. Whitney. And you could write away to J.C. Whitney and tell him, look, I want to put a 321 Pontiac, I guess a 421 Pontiac engine in my Studebaker, made it to a Corvette transmission and a Ford rear end, and they would sell you the brackets and parts to do it. So I went to a junkyard where someone had just bought a Catalina and wrapped it into a pole, and we took the engine, and then we bought a Corvette transmission, and I took it to Wingdale drag strip, where we went under 14 seconds, which was really fast in those days for a street car. So that was my first car. One of the greatest cars I owned was my 62 VW Bug, which I drove, you know, well over 100,000 miles, drove it to Woodstock, saw Woodstock. That was a pretty amazing thing. I owned it when I met my wife, so that has great fond memories of Meg and I driving all around and dating. And I remember driving back from her house in Brooklyn in the winter. Those things didn't have heaters, and I would look for puddles to drive through because it would splash water onto the exhaust and throw a little heat into the cockpit. I bought a 275 GTB long nose alloy coupe 6-carb car that I didn't know at the time, but it had raced in the Targa Florio, but it was a great car. I drove that as a daily, 65,000 miles, rain, sleet, snow, New York City, and in a great act of civil disobedience on the day that the President of the United States dropped the national speed limit to 55 miles an hour. I set a record that I think maybe still stands. I drove from Boston to New York City in 2 hours in that car. So you can do the math on the speed. The last car I ever sold was the 275 GTB, and I regret having sold it, but I needed the money to buy my Lola. And after the Lola, you know, I wrote and directed some pictures and motion pictures, including The Exterminator, which really did very well and made me some money. And I was able to buy the Ford Mark IV that was the only running Ford Mark IV that had competed in Le Mans and actually finished 4th overall, driven by Mark Donohue and Bruce McLaren. And that is one of the most original, spectacular cars I've ever owned, and I've driven that on the road about 60,000 miles. I still own it. It's a fantastic car. And then as time went on, I made a little more money and I was able to buy P34 0846, the Daytona winner, and I was able to buy another spectacular, really completely original 412P, which was a customer P4, the Maranello Concessionaire car that finished 3rd overall at SPA. I collected a number of other cars, and one day I got a call from a gentleman who was working with Pininfarina and said, Jim, you know, you have a great collection of old cars. Would you ever consider commissioning a new car? I said to Andrea, look, I would be interested in doing this, but here's what I want to do. I want to take an Enzo, which was the latest and greatest Ferrari supercar, and I want to make an homage to my P34 0846, the Daytona winner. And, you know, he took a gulp and said, okay, because he realized that, you know, this would really be a bit sacrilegious. I mean, we were going to take a brand new Enzo. Turned out the last Enzo made, still with the plastic on the seats, take it apart, throw out a lot of it, you know, re-engineer it, and clothe it to look like a completely different car. So I sent my P34 over to Pininfarina as inspiration, and we began the adventure that eventually became Ferrari P45 by Pininfarina, but initially was not an official Ferrari project. Ferrari had nothing to do with it. It was myself and Pininfarina. P45 Competizione began with the dream of building, engineering, and designing a car and taking it racing. The problem is that we had made a one-off car and there was really no way to take it racing. It wasn't homologated. We certainly couldn't race it as a prototype against the Audi LMP1s. So we went to Le Mans and we went to different race organizers and we said, look, we'd like to go racing with a car that looks like Ferrari P45 by Pininfarina. Would you be interested? Le Mans sort of said, you know, we might be interested, but it would be in the Garage 56 program as an experimental car, which really was kind of a one-off thing and sort of a sideshow to the 24 hours of Le Mans. So we then went to the Nürburgring and they said, sure, tell us what you want to do. Later they told us that every year someone comes to them and says, look, we want to build a car and race the 24 hours of Nürburgring, and they always say, sure, come back, show us what you want to do, but no one's ever done it. But this time we did it. So we began thinking, okay, could we base it as a 12-cylinder Ferrari with a carbon fiber tub like the Enzo? And we soon realized that you really can't go endurance racing anymore with a 12-cylinder motor because it's too fuel inefficient. So originally we were thinking of perhaps basing it on a 333 S.p.A. Ferrari, which they then turned into the F50, but the V12 ruled that out. So we basically thought that the best thing to base it on was a 430 GT2 race car, and because eventually I wanted to make it road legal, we began with a 430 Scuderia. And that's what the adventure began as, and it was an incredible adventure. You know, we redesigned the whole car, the suspension, the chassis. We used a Yulin race gearbox. We really redesigned the whole motor. At the end, we frankly used about the block, and that's about it, some of the heads. And we built a car that looked like Ferrari P45 by Pininfarina, but now was P45 Competizione, built to GT2 race standards, and we took it racing at the ring. The ring is amazing. You race against 150 cars. You race in incredible weather. You know, we were crashed into, we had a flat tire, but we kept going and we finished 39th overall. Just finishing at the ring is pretty good. And we actually beat one of the factory BMW cars in our class, finishing second in class. So this gave us the appetite to come back. But we knew to come back and win, we'd have to do something extraordinary engineering-wise. And that's when we went to the KER system. And that was a 2012 car. We finished first in class, 12th overall. We are the highest finishing hybrid car ever in a 24-hour race. We won the FIA Alternative Energies Championship, and it really was a dream. After we did P4-5 Competizione, Porsche made the 918, which was a KERS car, a hybrid car. McLaren made the P1, which was a hybrid car, and Ferrari made La Ferrari. So I said, fantastic. Maybe these guys will come and race us. And I publicly challenged all of them to come to the ring and race us at the 24 hours. And the organizers of the ring agreed that if they wanted to come racing, they would find a way to homologate those cars to race in the 24 hours. And to me, the ring is the ultimate test of street cars. Well, guess what? None of them, or no privateer in the world, wanted to buy one of those cars, and no factory wanted to take one of them and come and race us. I said, you know what? I'm going back to basics. I'm building a simple, lightweight sports car that conceptually an owner could drive on the road, own or convert, race successfully, and drive home from the track, and can compete with Ferrari, Porsche, Mercedes, Audi, everyone as a sports car in basically GT. And that's what we're doing. But we are becoming a constructor. We have designed, engineered, we're going to build the entire car in-house. We have designed a unique carbon fiber chassis, which we're building. We have a fantastic major engine that I can't announce exactly now, but I will soon. A 3.5 twin-turbo V6. We're going to make a lightweight car, and I'll show you what the car is going to look like. You can't show that quite yet, but I think it's going to be amazing. And we're going to go as a constructor to the Geneva Auto Show in 2015. We're going to present it to the public. We actually are going to offer it for sale in a very small edition, because if we could sell 9 or 10 of these cars, we could homologate it and eventually race at places like Le Mans, Daytona, and Sebring. But no matter what, even if we don't make one sale, we're going to take the car and race the 24 hours of Nürburgring in 2015. And people will sit here and tell you a lot of things, but I'm sitting here and telling you that we're going for first overall, and we will have a very competitive car. Now, as a one-car team up against the huge factories that have multiple cars and many, many, many more resources than we do, will we win? It's unlikely. But you know what? We're not going to be a joke. We're going to be very fast. We're going to run at the top, in the top class, and I think this thing is going to be an amazing adventure. I'm a car guy. I love all kinds of cars. It has really nothing to do with money. I'm very lucky to have enough money to pursue this hobby at a high level. But you know what? If I didn't, I'd buy a clapped-out MGB, I'd restore it in my garage or under a tent, and I'd take it out and drive with someone I love, and I'd go on adventures and unwinding roads. The events that I love best are the parking lot shows and the cars and caffeine, because you get to see all kinds of people and all kinds of cars. If you can't afford a LaFerrari, so what? Buy a cool car, work on it yourself, enjoy it, and have a great time. That's what's important, is enjoying the ride. The destination is often all people worry about. I can't wait till I get somewhere. I can't wait till next Tuesday. Who cares about that? Enjoy the ride. Don't worry about the destination.
We're living in the fast lane, baby. Tuning in the fast lane daily. Car magazines and roll news, man. Ain't got the time for shopping at the newsstand. We're living in the fast lane, baby. Tuning in the fast lane daily. News for the always on the go folks. Merge to the left and pass all the slow pokes. You can view how you choose to, fastlanedaily.com or YouTube. Hosted by my man Derek D. Subscribe right now, don't just take it from me.